Dear leaders, welcome to our fourth session on spiritual leadership. And I really want to ask you, are you enjoying our lessons? You know, like Reinhard Bonnke said, even if you are not enjoying my preaching, I'm enjoying it myself. I want to say that I'm very excited about this series of teachings on spiritual leadership, because if you're following them and you apply them, I want to tell you your leadership will skyrocket. Because God is going to lift you up. And God usually uses two qualities. One side, he uses spirituality, and on the other side, he uses professionalism. When you see Daniel in Babylon, God used spirituality. He was a spiritual man. He was committed. He did what God wanted him to do. And on the other side, he was professionally excellent. When you are spiritually matured, and when you are professionally experienced, you are a candidate for God's promotion. And I hope that these lessons will help you to build and mold and groom you for God to appoint you and to promote you in your leadership. Today we're taking care of the fourth session, and we're continuing the lesson we had last week on qualities of spiritual leaders. And I remind you of what we had last week. We talked about 12 qualities in 3 groups. The first group was, the functional qualities, which talked about competence, talked about character, and talked about continuity. And then we talked about the result-oriented qualities that talked about a project, that talked about people that you have influenced, and talked about a personal product. And then we talked about the qualities that involve the person of the leader, and the person of the leader talks about power, authority, or the influence that you create in the lives of people. Talks about the expertise, your personal experience that you have and which projects you. Talked about the relationships that you build in leadership. Talked about your sanctification, your sanctity, the fact that you are holy, set apart for the Lord. And then we talked about optimism, that's faith, believing God for everything that you want to do, that God will do it in you and through you. And lastly, nomination, having a specific domain of your calling. Today we are going to go much deeper, and we are going to talk particularly about the results, Remember, the results are the projects, the people, and the product. So that's what we're going to talk. But before we get into that, please, can we get a nugget for today? Our nugget for today comes from my own personal experience, and this is what I say. Every leader is known by his product. Right? Every leader is known by his product. His product ends up becoming his identity and his legacy. And so if you are a leader, what is your product? Yes, you listening to me, maybe you don't have a product today, and if you don't have a product, I say that's not a problem. That's why we are teaching these lessons, so that you will be able to have a product, and you'll be able to, in the next 5 or 10 years, you have to develop a product. A leader's product may be an article, something that has been produced, something that is touched, that is visible, that is durable, that is beneficial to a group of people or to people in general. Let me give you an example. Somebody just appreciated the coat I'm wearing. It's a product of somebody. The material is locally made in Burkina Faso, and the sewing is sewn by a Burkina tailor. It is a product of somebody. It's the product. Once I was wearing a suit, and everybody appreciated the suit, and I tried to see, and I saw that it was D&G. I don't know what you know D&G. I felt awfully, woefully bad, because D&G is a homosexual couple that is specialized in producing suits, tailoring. And I felt awfully bad that the suit that was appreciated on me was produced by a homosexual couple. You know, I hardly wore that coat again, that suit again, because I knew the origin. But what I'm saying is that if you are a leader, you must have a product. And if you don't have a product, no problem. In the next 5 years, you should be able to have a product. So the product may be an article, it may be something you've produced, it may be a procedure, you know, a procedure of how things are done. It might be a creation, or it might be a person in whom you have invested, and he is making things happen. You know, Billy Graham was brought to the Lord by a tailor during a youth conference, a youth camp, at the age of 16. And this tailor crept into Billy Graham's bed, called him up, he was one of the camp leaders, and talked to Billy Graham and led him to the Lord. Nobody knows about that tailor today, but everybody knows about Billy Graham. Billy Graham became one of the biggest and most powerful evangelists of the 20th century. That is the product of that tailor. So your product may be somebody that God has empowered and God is using mightily across the world. In fact, I can say that I'm the product of two people. I'm the product of Professor Zachariah Tanefumum, and I'm the product of Pastor Reverend Peter Schneider. They invested in my life. And today, by God's grace, God is using me around the world to teach leadership, to marriage, and also to pray and deliver people from marital problems. So you must have a product, my dear. Whoever and whatever leadership you are carrying, you need to have a product. Now, the product impacts individuals. The product may impact families. The product may impact a particular society. So, whatever your product, if it outlives you, it outlasts you, goes beyond your life, then your product becomes your legacy. Because people will remember you because of your product. You know, the product is the evidence of a leader's influence. The product is the evidence of the leader's success, of his impact. And, you know, leaders are remembered because of their product, what they left behind them. So make sure, please, you will remember after you left because of the product that you created. And now, if you don't have a product, as I said, you know, it's no problem. That's why we're going through these classes. But we're saying that in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, may people know you and people remember you because of the product that you created. You know, I've talked about Billy Graham. There are other people for whom we remember. There is B.S. Bright. I don't know whether you've heard of B.S. Bright. B.S. Bright is the author or the creator of Campus Crusade for Christ. That's a ministry, the one Christian ministry that has gone around the whole world. It's in more than 180 different nations. It has more than 5,000 full-time workers, 25,000 part-time workers, and more than 700 languages have been used to translate the Jesus film by Campus Crusade is going around the world. It has so many branches. And so many thousands of people have been saved through. You know, when you have the name B.S. Bright, immediately what comes to mind is Campus Crusade for Christ. He's dead, but he's still alive. You know, when you talk about Paul from the Bible, you know, what do you remember? The New Testament, Acts of the Apostles, and the Pauline letters, which are, 13 out of 17 letters or books of the New Testament. And what do you think? You also think about Luke. Luke, who has written 2 of the most important books in the Bible. Luke is a student, or he was mentored by Paul. Luke was a medical doctor. We don't remember Luke for the journeys that he made with Paul and treated them when they were, but remember him for the Gospel of Luke and for Acts of the Apostles. 2 powerful books. If they are missing in the New Testament, the church will be confused. So please, your product will create an impact and a legacy, an identity for you. There's another lady, what I want to use to encourage you is she's called Corrie ten Boom. You might have not heard the name, but this lady began her ministry at the age of 54. You know, Corrie ten Boom, she's a Dutch from Holland. She had a junior sister called Betty, and her father. The three of them were caught by the Germans, and they were taken to the concentration camps of the Nazis. And they lived there for long. Betty died, and the father died. But miraculously, at the age of 54, she was released from the concentration camps. And that's when she began her ministry. So, if you are not up to 54, or you are above 54, it's not too late to begin a ministry. And Corrie ten Boom began her ministry at the age of 54. She died at the age of 90. And within those years, she traveled into more than 60 nations. She preached to millions of people. She wrote more than 10 books. And thousands of people came to know the Lord Jesus Christ through her. She has a product. Her ministry that is behind her, and the books that she wrote, and the thousands of lives that will be in heaven because of her ministry. I don't want to continue mentioning names, but you know, some other person that has impacted my life is Haggai Institute. You know, John Edmund Haggai. He's gone to glory. But in 2002, I was appointed the director of Haggai Institute for Francophone Africa, French-speaking Africa. And I worked with them for 12 years. And that God used him to usher me into leadership. I wrote my first book about leadership in 2004 when I had not even done any leadership. And then people, you know, people were reading the book. It was impactful. But some asked, what has a medical doctor got to do with leadership? And so it provoked me to go to school. At the age of 55, I was in school sitting with children who were as old as my first son to do my master's degree in leadership. And then above the age of 60, I was invited by a president, Pierre Nkurunziza, of blessed memory, the then president of Burundi. He invited me for a big program in his nation. You know, there were about 150 dignitaries, ministers, governors, presidents of universities, professors, bishops, and for 4 days we had a good training with them. And there were only 3 speakers. There was a speaker from America, a rector of a university. I was there, and also he himself was a speaker. And during that program, by God's grace, I consulted with this rector, and he said, no, Daniel, please, I want to give you a scholarship to do a doctorate in Christian leadership in my school. And so in 3 years, I was able to complete my doctorate and in an American university. So you see, what I'm just trying to say here is that you can still study and be impacted in your life so as to create a product. You know, while I was doing the master's degree, I was sitting in a class, and our lecturer was from Senegal. He was much younger than me. And so we're introducing ourselves, and he came to me and I said, I'm Dr. Daniel SHU, and he ticked. He said, could you be that Dr. Daniel SHU has written a book on leadership, effective leadership, the African challenge? I said, yes, sir, I'm the writer. He said, I'm so surprised. I have recommended your book because I've read it. It's so powerful. I've recommended your book to my master students in Senegal. And now I come to Bangui, South Africa, and the writer, the author of the book is sitting in my class for a master's degree. I'm a bit complex. I said, no, sir, I know what I'm looking for. I got my master's degree. I was among young people. I got my PhD, and now, you know, everywhere I go, I'm a professor in leadership. And so I have a standing, a social standing, to be able to talk about leadership, and people will listen to me. So what I'm just saying is that you need to build your expertise. You need to build your personality. You need to build yourself to a point where your product will have an impact. And so what I'm saying is that if you are a leader, you must have a product. And your product will become your identity. And your identity will become your legacy. Today, we want to get deeper into the, the product of a leader. The product of a leader A spiritual leader is in 3 different areas. 1, it's at the level of the ministry. 2, it's at the level of the family. And 3, it's at the level of the profession. So you are either having products at the level of your ministry, you're having products at the level of your family, or you're having products at the level of your profession. I want us to look at each of these areas and what the qualities of a leader and what the product will be. First of all, at the level of the ministry. Whether your ministry is in the church, is a Christian organization, there are 2 kinds of products. There's a product within the organization, and there's a product without the organization. That's out of the organization. So let's look at 2 kinds of products. 1, products within the organization. I will just use the church setting. If you are a pastor, if you are a church leader, whether you are leading a local assembly, whether you are leading a group of churches, what is the product that God is expecting of you? I want to give you 5 aspects of a product that God is expecting of you from within the church or from within the denomination. The first is souls that are saved. People that turn from sinners to saints. People that will be found in heaven because the gospel that you preached brought them to the knowledge of the truth. If you are a spiritual leader, you must have spiritual children. Without spiritual children, there is really no evidence of a product that you have. The second is disciples that you have trained. You know, the Apostle Paul did not only plant churches. The Apostle Paul also had a lot of spiritual children. Apostle Paul, you know, he built Timothy, Titus, Silas, Epaphras, Achilles and Priscilla, Epaphroditus. He built people who became spiritual leaders. And before he died, you know, or before he died, these leaders were involved in God's work in different dimensions. He had already sent Timothy to Crete. He had sent Titus to Ephesus, you know, different places where they learned to have become leaders. And before he died, he gave specific charges to Timothy. So if you are a leader, you must have groom other leaders, train other leaders, build, invest in the lives of all leaders. And then the third kind of success you have is you must build successors. Jesus Christ built 3 kinds of successors. He built those who will step into his shoe, and he built 3 of them. It was Peter, James, and John. Those were in the internal circle. And he was saying, you know, one of you will become my successor. Why did Jesus have to build 3 leaders when he knew he would know the person who would succeed him? The answer is, he was just giving us an example to follow. You may never quite know who will succeed you, who will die early, who will leave you, and so you build 3 leaders. And of course, you know, at the end, James died immediately after Jesus Christ was taken back to heaven. So if he had invested only in James, he would have lost it all. Peter backslid. Thank God he came back. If he had invested all in Peter, he backslid, never came back, he would have not had. But Peter came back, became the leader, and John also stayed and became a very prominent leader. So he built, first of all, the inner circle of leaders who are successors. Then he built the outer circle of leaders who were the 12 disciples who were departmental leaders, leaders who went out of Jerusalem and went to different places. You know, many people say that Paul was the 12th apostle. Paul replaced Judas, who died and who could not continue. And Paul was called by Jesus to become an apostle to the Gentiles that we are, and that's how the gospel came to us. And then he built the 70. That was the outer circle of leaders, leaders who may not necessarily work with him, who could go and start their own ministries and do their own things. So you need to build those kind of leaders. 1, you build successors, you build departmental leaders, and you build leaders that can go on their own. And that's what Jesus showed us as a spiritual leader. 4thly, you must build resources. You must mobilize resources. You must bring in finances. You must bring in material resources so that the ministry will be built. It may be infrastructure, it may be plots, it might be material for the church. So that's what a leader builds. And lastly, you know, the members of your ministry must be edified, must be fulfilled. Their lives must become better in every dimension than they would have been without you. So you are creating an influence and you are building the lives of those that are in your ministry. So those are fruits of a leader within the ministry. But without the ministry, you know, you can build churches, you can plant churches. By God's grace, I'm a church planter. I've planted over 10 churches in my denomination. And so I am a church planter. I'm creating ministry without. I plant churches, and then when they are grown, I leave to people and I go. Presently, I am planting 2 churches where I am carrying out my ministry as a retired servant of God in my church, and God has employed me fully. So you may plant churches, you may carry out para-church spiritual ministries. You know, the television ministry that we're having here, a radio ministry, a book ministry, a literature ministry, a ministry to orphans, a ministry to prisoners, a ministry to street children, ministry to the indigenous and the needy. You know, those are ministries that, the pygmies, those are ministries that are not within the church, but they are ministries that are empowering people. You remember again what I said from the beginning. Church ministry and church leadership is about doing God's will and impacting the lives of others. Being faithful to God and seeing results. Having God work in you and then God working through you. That is spiritual leadership. And so you can be impacting people that are not in the church, but they are without the church, and God is using them powerfully. Then you can also be involved in social ministries. Social ministries are ministries that go out of the way to help people that, you know, would have not had the kind of help. You know, I've had young people that I've trained. One of them is involved in a ministry to what they call the unmarried women, the unmarried girls that have children, you know, single mothers. She's carrying out a ministry that my wife is carrying out a ministry towards orphans. We are grooming and raising orphans in our house. Some of them already had their degrees in the university, some are in high school, but that's it. We are giving a future to these children, because if they were the state in their families, their parents died, nobody would have ever given a future to them. Some of them would have died at the age of 2 days, or at the age of 3 months or 6 months, but today they are alive and God is using them. So if you are a leader, you must be able to have a product either within the organization or without the organization. Let me pass to the next level of product or impact. It's at the level of the family. You know, many leaders fail by taking care of their children. The Bible makes us understand in 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 4 and 5 that a leader must first of all succeed in his family. If you don't succeed in your family, if your children are not well brought up, if they are not disciplined, then you have failed to be a leader. I want to ask you, are your children, do they know the Lord Jesus Christ? Do they love Jesus? Are they involved in your ministry? Are they serving God? Are they married in the Lord? Are they loving God? That is a priority. So in family product, the first thing is the success of your offspring. And the most important success is not professional success. The first important success is spiritual success. 3 of my children gave their lives to the Lord before the age of 10. And 1 of them gave their lives to the age of adolescence. And if you want to understand this, in Africa, 10% of those in our churches gave their lives to the Lord before the age of 10. But it's an outstanding 59% gave their lives to the Lord between the age of 10 and 20. That's a study that we made. And it therefore means that 59 plus 10, 69% of our children give their lives to, of our Christians, give their lives to the Lord before the age of 20. And the people that are most impactful in the lives of children before the age of 20 are who? Not teachers, not Sunday school teachers, not classroom teachers, but the parents. Because the children spend an average of 70 hours every week at home. compared to 40 hours at school, and compared to less than 5 hours in church. So the greatest person who can create an impact in the lives of the children spiritually is the parents. So if your children have not yet believed and they are beyond the age of 10, please walk out, fast, pray, and witness to them. Have a church in your house so that the children will believe. And if by the age of 20 they have not believed, the chances keep dropping. Because between the age of 20 and 30, 25% of the members of our churches gave their lives to the Lord. But above 30, only 6% of those in our churches came to know the Lord after the age of 30. You understand? It's a very, very profound research, and it makes parents know that we should have an impact, spiritual impact, in our homes. So first impact in our homes is the success of our children and offspring. Second impact in our homes is the impact of investment. Investing for the future. By God's grace, I have started a university. It's called Lead Higher Institute. And it's by God's grace going to become a full-fledged university. It's not for me. If it was for me, I don't need money out of the university. But I need to impact the lives of people. And that's why one of our goals is that students that come into our university, before they come out, they should become matured Christians. Whether they give their lives to the Lord and grow and become matured Christians. It helps to impact the society. And I will leave the university to my children. They will continue to manage it after I am gone. So it's important to invest, have investments that you will leave behind for your children. It might also become family property. Plots, houses, and other things that you can do. So my question is, have you built a family legacy for your children? And the last legacy is property, professional. If you are a professional, you are a doctor, you are an engineer, I don't know what profession you have. In addition to building a family legacy of family products, in addition to having ministerial, you should also have a professional product. And it might be investment in your area of profession. It might be an enterprise. It might be an organization, an association, a non-governmental organization that you have built, which will impact the lives of many people and which will also be a legacy that you leave behind and will continue to influence many, many generations. It may be men and women that you have trained and groomed and raised and mentored, and God is going to use them for the rest of their lives. There are thousands of young people that I've mentored, and by God's grace, they are succeeding. Many of them, they are all over the world. Many in America, some in Europe, and they are serving the Lord, and they are also being blessed because they will have had some level of education, a standard of a position in society to be able to help their families. So, or you implement some projects and get them realized. So I want to end here. I want to end here and say that a leader has three kinds of products. One, a spiritual leader, product from his ministry, products from his family, and if he has a profession which is different from the ministry, he also has a product at the level of his profession. So I want to end here and I want to ask you, one, do you have a product? If yes, what is your product? Are there people? Are there projects? Or there are articles or things that you have done? But every leader must have a product. And his product will outlive him. His product should go from generation to generation. My prayer is that anybody listening to me should determine that in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, by God's grace, he will have a product in his area of expertise. And God will use him mightily to develop that product. And that product should have two purposes. A product that will influence the lives of people on earth, but also a product that will influence eternity. And I want to say the most important products are those that will influence eternity. Think about it, pray about it, and determine that God will grant you grace to have a product. May God richly bless you, and see you next week.